Hello, my name is Alan Webb, and I am a research methodologist. And I want to talk with you today about how to write a dissertation. I've recently written a book on how to write a qualitative dissertation, and I want to talk about the essentials in writing a successful dissertation. The last time I checked, there are approximately 33 or 34 parts to a dissertation. But when you look at the internal mechanism of a good dissertation, there are 14 elements that are logically connected. I call this the chain of logic. And I have all 14 of the links to that chain on the board here. I'll begin with the first link in the chain, which is the introduction. A good introduction will present the material in such a way that the reader of the dissertation will ask the question, so. The opportunity that the dissertation writer has in the introduction is to use thick, rich description in order to reach out and grab the reader, if you will, metaphorically, and draw him or her into the narrative, to gain entrance into your reader's mind, to captivate them and make them interested in knowing what this dissertation research is all about. The introduction is your first opportunity to do that. You can use statistics, you can use historical information, you can use anecdotes, you can use tables, you can use policies, you can use laws, policy statements, or famous historical incidents. But the objective of the introduction is to gain the reader's interest, so that when the reader finishes the introduction, he says to himself, so. And so you go to the second link in the chain of logic, which is the problem statement. It can be a problem or an issue, or it can be a phenomenon. But normally, historically, it's been labeled as the problem statement. So, at the end of the introduction, the reader asks the question, so? And the answer is, so we have a problem here, or we have an issue here, or we have a phenomenon here. And then I say, as the reader of the introduction in the dissertation, so what? And then that's where the purpose statement comes in. The purpose statement tells the reader, so what? If there is a problem, if there is an issue, if there is a phenomenon, the purpose statement tells the reader that I want to better understand this problem, or I want to explain this issue, or I want to explore this phenomenon, or whatever the purpose of your dissertation is going to be. And then after reading the purpose, my natural inclination is to ask the question, so how are you going to do this? And the answer to that is we have research questions. And if you're doing a qualitative dissertation, your research questions should begin with how, why, or what kinds. How do certain individuals accomplish certain actions or certain feats, or whatever the dissertation is going to be about. And then we move to the fifth chain in logic, which is the literature review. And it is the literature review is where you record what the state of the art is in the issue that you're going to be researching. And you're constantly asking the question, what is the gap in the literature? And there are a variety of ways of discovering the gap in the literature, which I cover in depth in the book. But you're looking for something that you can add to the current state of investigation. And that's the purpose of a dissertation. Unfortunately, it doesn't always turn out that way, but a good dissertation researcher will find a gap in the literature and will fill that gap and will make a significant contribution to the field of study, whether it is linguistics, whether it is education, whether it is psychology, whatever the field is. Then we move to the theoretical framework. The theoretical framework is a guide, and it is the first, second, third, fourth, fifth, the sixth chain, link in the chain of logic. The theoretical framework is designed to guide the research. Some have used the metaphor of a roadmap. It is what helps inform your research questions, along with the literature review. Theoretical frameworks are intended to help the reader see the foundation, the architecture of what you're doing. And then the seventh link in the chain of logic is the methodology. There are three types of methodologies in social science research. They are quantitative, which deals with numbers. There are qualitative, which deal with words. And there are mixed methods, which you have a specific combination of quantitative and qualitative measures in the research design. And then the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, the eighth link in the chain of logic is the method. And in qualitative research, you have 5 traditional methods, which are grounded theory, ethnography, narrative inquiry, phenomenology, and case study, which all have their separate protocols. And the next link in the chain of logic is data collection. And data collection for a qualitative research there are 3 types of data that you collect. There are observations, there are interviews, and there are documents. There are other forms of data, but those are the 3 primary ones. The data analysis is the next link in the chain of logic, and that is how you analyze your data. There are at least 70 or 80 types of coding strategies and data analysis techniques which can be applied to the data. And then once you analyze the data, then it's time to present the findings. The findings in the research are, how do your participants answer your research questions? The only thing that should go in here is the words and the analysis of your participants. And then we move to the discussion. The discussion is where you take your literature and how your literature answers the research questions, and you compare and contrast that with how your participants answered the research questions. The only thing that should go in here is the literature and the comparison. Many students make the mistake of putting much of what is supposed to go in the discussion section in the findings, and then they end up with nothing to say, so they say nothing or they say the same thing over again. Also, if you have any ideas that you want to add to this discussion, this is where they go. Now, your conclusions. Usually you draw 3 or 4 conclusions, which are your overall insight into the research that you've done. I like to end the conclusions with one thing. There's one thing that you will discover in your research that is not presented in the literature. Now, that is very important, because that, my friend, is your original contribution to knowledge. A lot of the dissertations that I've read, they don't have an original contribution to knowledge. Or they have an original contribution to knowledge, but they don't realize that they have one. So good dissertations realize that the purpose of a dissertation is to make an original contribution to the field of knowledge. They know they have made that contribution. They know what that contribution is, and they articulate that, and they bring attention to it in this section. And then the final link in the chain of logic is recommendations. Recommendations normally fall into 3 categories. One would be a recommendation for future research. Another would be a recommendation for policymakers and shareholders, stakeholders, and then a final recommendation would be for participants or for those who are practitioners in the field of study. Important. Your dissertation is going to be judged by one criteria primarily. Did you answer the research questions? Did you fulfill the purpose of the research? In the chain of logic, the gap in the literature is going to correspond with the problem statement. The theoretical framework is going to guide the entire process. The methodology, whether it is quantitative, qualitative, or mixed, will be the most appropriate methodology to use in order to answer the research questions. The method, whether it is narrative inquiry or grounded theory or ethnography or phenomenology or case study, is going to determine it should be the most appropriate method to use in order to answer the research questions and fulfill the purpose of the research. The data collection. The data that you collect should be, once again, the most appropriate data to collect in order to answer the research questions and fulfill the purpose. Data analysis, the way you analyze the data, should be the most appropriate analytic methods in order to answer these research questions and fulfill the purpose. The findings, very important here, because the question that your dissertation committee is going to ask, did the student answer the research questions? And this is where they'll find out. So make sure in your findings that they correspond to the research questions, and they do answer them and fulfill the purpose. The discussion, the conclusion, the recommendations, everything should come back to the research questions and the purpose statement. And as a dissertation writer, the best thing you can do is connect the dots for your committee. Make sure they realize that you understand that all of this that you have done is based upon answering the research questions and fulfilling the purpose of the research. Thank you very much.